So I know we've kind of touched on good planning to date, and finding that PR that's going to take on that responsibility, see this thing through. What happens if all the plans are in place, we find that right PR, we get down 6, 8, 10, whatever months into the estate process, and the beneficiaries, for whatever reason, they don't think the PR is living up to his or her responsibilities. Maybe they have a sense that the assets are disappearing. Maybe the assets are being used for the personal gain of that individual. Is there a way that the beneficiaries can bring legal recourse against that PR?
So there is. I would tread cautiously through that, because it could be, at the end of the day, probably could be a waste of time if you don't have good, reasonable grounds to bring to the courts and say, hey, listen, the PR is doing a terrible job. We get this feeling that he's not doing his job. Well, the courts enshrine testamentary, your last will and testament. They really guard that heavily, and so they want to make the best. They want to preserve the wishes of the testator, and so they may lean towards, well, if you don't have legal grounds, if you don't have evidence of there being wrongdoing, we can look at this, but it could just be a waste of time and cost you money if you're just going off of a feeling. But if you can kind of bring proof and evidence that they aren't doing their job and they are costing the beneficiaries money, then you probably have a good case. But on that note, I would just again talk to your lawyer and see if there's enough grounds to have that person removed and replaced.
Yeah, that's a good thing to keep in mind. I think the constant communication between the beneficiaries and that PR, it's a two-way street. So, I think the beneficiaries need to take an active kind of role in the process as well, not pressuring the PR to get things done ahead of time, but, consistently be asking for that accounting of the estate, following up on items that, that they know to be important, and, having some level of understanding themselves in the whole process, and not just, okay, it's the PR's job, I'm going to sit back and you let me know in 24 or whatever months when I can have my money, and until then I'll just give you free rein to do it. So I think if you're involved as that beneficiary, there's probably a higher chance of accountability in that situation. And then maybe certain circumstances that could lead themselves to mismanagement of funds, or just even the PR becomes overwhelmed and forgets to move some investments around and loses some money as a result of that. Maybe they invested them incorrectly into something that was too high risk or something like that. Just keeping on top of these things and reviewing those estate statements and saying, well, is this a good place for the money? Have you contacted an investment advisor to ensure that while these funds are held in trust over the course of this period of time, that my interests are being protected? So I think it falls back a bit on that beneficiary, but yeah, like you say, there is some room for recourse. It's probably a bit difficult, it's probably time consuming, and if you leave it to the very end, there might be nothing left to recover depending on how things play out. So it's important, like everything, to kind of just plan ahead and take a bit of responsibility in the process. So.
At the end of the day, after the estate's been dispersed, this is 2 years of your life. Yeah, it is a long time, and money's involved. So time and money are big factors too that can put strain on relationships. But the reality is, you're going to be family well after this has all been played out, and I would just strongly encourage you to communicate and find ways to be helpful to the PR because they are saddled with a lot of responsibility, and the last thing that they need is beneficiaries saying, when am I going to get paid?
Right.
I would just say this is a good opportunity to come together as a family. That would be the wish of the testator.
For sure.
So just tread on that one on the relational end, and I think you can see some wins that didn't have to go to court.
Right.
So yeah, I would say that. And the other thing I'd also say is like when it comes to the length of time, it is a lengthy process. So again, there's mechanisms that where funds can bypass probate, or you can have options where decisions can be made ahead of time prior to a full loss of the investments.
Right.
Because it's a lengthy process.
Yeah.
And like you said, things can be lost, and sometimes not due to the management of the
Yep.
PR.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and something that I like to bring up with my clients all the time is, yes, it's important to preserve that financial legacy, but to me, the family dynamic and the legacy of the family itself is the most important part of it. If that PR is able to maximize the returns on the investments over the course of 24 months, but the relationships between all the beneficiaries break down in the meantime, have we done a good job with this? I would say no.
Yeah.
I think it's more important, and like you mentioned, I think that testator would prefer to see that family continue on, sit down for that Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner, and keep those family moments alive and well long after they've passed. I think that's an important part of it. So.
And I think that's maybe like a great conversation to have down the road is, what is good estate planning? What does that look like?